Hi, for my first history project, I went through hundreds of family photos to try and find the top 7 historical events throughout my family. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find much evidence of what happened to my ancestors, so most of this information will pertain to myself rather than the past generations. But let's go back as far as we can, and that's 1934. For my first event, this will be about the death of my great-grandparents and my great-aunt. In my opinion, this is the second most significant event. 1934 is when my grandma was born to Calvin Herschel Cowan and Nellie Marguerite Cowan. Later on, in 1940, her younger sister, Shirley Margaret Cowan, was born. Both my grandma and her sister were born and raised in Essex, Ontario, until my grandma was 10. Tragically, at the ages of 4, 32, and 38, her parents and sister got struck by a train while crossing the tracks in their car after church. They also had a 16-year-old hitchhiker in the car with them when they were struck. My grandma had decided to go to some relative's house after church instead of going with them. This tragedy, of course, affected my grandma in many ways, but had she gotten into the car with them that day, my entire family tree of 30-plus people wouldn't exist. This tragedy left my grandma as an only child, so when she met my grandpa, Malcolm, and found out he was also an only child, they had a dream to create a big family with lots of kids because they didn't get that growing up. My dad's the youngest of 5 kids, and this has allowed me to travel places like Kingston and Gananoque to visit my aunts and uncles. These are places I may not have otherwise visited. For my evidence, I have some secondary evidence in the form of a newspaper clipping from the Windsor Star on September 22nd, 1944. The font may be hard to read, so here's what it says. Either a flagman should be maintained 24 hours a day at the MCR crossing in Essex, or traffic gates removed in 1933 should be restored. This was the decision of an 8-man coroner's jury. Now this is the statement of a witness who had just crossed the tracks right before my family. The Cowan family was coming from the opposite direction while they were struck by the train and smashed into a broken pole. Cowan, his wife, and the young hitcher were struck and killed instantly, but 5-year-old Shirley Cowan died later in Grace Hospital. For my second event, I will be talking about my mom moving to Ontario. I think this is arguably my most substantial event in terms of effects, as it affects both sides of my family. So my mom, Lindsay, was born and raised in Kelowna, British Columbia, along with her parents and older sister. She lived in Kelowna until the summer before 9th grade when her dad got a job in Burlington. So she and her family moved to Burlington and she went to Lord Elgin High School, which is now Robert Bateman. A few years later, her dad moved back to Kelowna while she, her sister, and mom decided to stay in Burlington. Had she gone back to live in Kelowna, she wouldn't have met my dad, who was living in Oakville at the time. This is very significant as everyone's lives would be different. My brother and I wouldn't be alive, she would have a completely different life, and here I have some primary evidence, which is this photo from when they made the cross-country move here. For my third most substantial event, I have moving houses. I lived in South Burlington until the end of 5th grade. During that summer, I had to say bye to my best friend, who I was inseparable from, and to say goodbye to most of my old friends. Now I know South Burlington isn't very far from here, but I knew it would just be harder to keep contact with them, and eventually I stopped talking to all but one of them. Now for the first time in my life, I had to go to a new school, make new friends in a new neighborhood. I eventually made some friends, but by grade 8, we stopped talking completely. I then made more friends, but was always the butt of the joke, and I knew that they weren't good friends either. After a long 8th grade year, I realized how much experience those friends had given me, and now I'd like to think I'm smarter for it. Overall, this impacted me by giving me a few good life lessons on how to deal with the not-so-nice people of this world. For my evidence, I have a primary evidence in the form of a sign on my house from when it first sold 4 years ago. For my fourth event, I have owning a boat. Now I'm sure what you're thinking is, how can this affect me enough to put it in my top 7 historical things? Well, pretty much my whole life from ages 1 to 8 was spent on our boat. We would go to the Toronto Islands, to our friends, and a couple times even went to Ohio to go to Cedar Point. My first steps were on that boat, and when I was really young, we went all across South Ontario to Trenton, through the Trent Severn waterways, through all 44 locks, and ended up in Georgian Bay. Over the 8 years, I learned a lot and had a ton of awesome memories and experiences. Spending that much time on a boat taught me a lot about water safety and how important it is to wear life jackets and watch yourself around water. Here's primary evidence, and it's a photo from the start of the Trent Severn at Lala. For my 5th most substantial event, I would have to say learning how to skate. My brother's always been a hockey player since he was 4 years old, so my dad would build us an ice rink in our backyard every single winter. I was little, so I wasn't very good at skating, regardless of the fact that we had our rink set up 24/7 during the winter. By the time I was 9, my mom signed me up for learning to skate, and by chance, they had Learn to Play Hockey happening during the same time. I was more advanced than the other kids at learning how to skate, but definitely still terrible. The man who was running the Learn to Play Hockey saw me and asked if I would be interested in playing hockey, which I had never been before, but I said yes and gave it a try. To this day, it's a big part of my life and my favorite thing to do by far. So had I never asked my mom to put me in that Learn to Skate, I probably wouldn't have ever tried hockey, and I would never even known how to skate in the first place. So here's a photo of me and my mom when my mom tried to first teach me to skate when I was 4. So this is primary evidence. For my 6th most substantial event, I'd have to say playing soccer. I'm sure as you can tell by that last event, I'm not really a soccer player anymore. But when I was little, I loved it. I made so many friends through it, and it got me active and into the world of sports. It got me an offer to play rep for the Bayhawks when I was 10, but I turned it down and played hockey instead. It taught me how to follow rules and all that stuff, but one of the most important parts was someone I played with. Maya and I were best friends when we were 5, playing on the same team, but unfortunately, our parents lost contact after the season ended. We ended up becoming friends again in 2021, and when we realized we played together when we were 5, it brought us together. The reason why it's so low on my list is because I think regardless of whether we played together or not when we were younger, we'd still be friends now. Here's the primary evidence of Maya and I playing together, and here's another one of when we went to a Toronto FC together for Canada Day. Event number 7, and the final one on my list. My family trip to Jamaica. Back in 2018, my grandma took 21 of my family members to Jamaica for our Christmas gift. A lot of my family lives a couple hours away from us, so it was nice to spend that week together with everyone in such a nice place. Everyone just had an awesome experience overall. We went to a lot of really cool places like Rick's Cafe during our week there, but I have to put this as our 7th most historical event as nothing major really happened that changed our family. But I decided to put it in as it was my dad's whole side of the family went and we all had a really awesome time. For my historical concept, I chose continuity and change. The 3 events I've chosen are having a boat, moving schools, and learning how to skate. So the first question is, was the order of these events important? Why or why not? I don't really think they were. Regardless of the fact that I had a boat, I still would have met the same people when I moved and had the same struggles. Same with learning how to skate. These are all events which were unrelated to each other, which makes me say the order of them didn't necessarily have an impact on me. How have these changed you? As I said above, I learned a lot after moving and seeing what some people are like. So overall, I'd say I know more about dealing with bad people and knowing how to stand up for myself. Learning how to skate had a huge impact on me. I now love hockey and can't imagine my life without it. Question 3. In what ways have I stayed the same? I mean, personality-wise, I really haven't changed. But I'm a lot more active now that I play hockey, as I rollerblade to and from school quite often, but I do still have that one friend from downtown, so that part of my life never really changed. In conclusion, this was all about my family. I know most of it was recent, but I still hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you for your time.